What if everything you think you know about ancient Egypt is only the surface? Beneath the sand lies a civilization so old that when Cleopatra looked upon the Great Pyramid, it was already more ancient to her than she is to us. 3,000 years of kings who called themselves gods, tombs sealed with curses, monuments so vast we still cannot fully explain how human hands raised them. But here is what they never tell you. Egypt did not simply rise, something made it possible, a single river in a sea of desert, and something eventually made it fall. Who was the first man to wear the double crown? What knowledge died with the pyramid builders? And how did the longest-lasting empire in human history end in the hands of one woman gambling against Rome itself? The answers were buried for a reason. Layer by layer, dynasty by dynasty, we are about to uncover them. The sand has kept its secrets long enough. This is the complete story of ancient Egypt. Imagine a land of endless desert, sand in every direction, burning under a sun that never seems to rest. Nothing grows, nothing lives. And then, cutting straight through that emptiness, there is a river, long, calm, and full of life. This is the Nile, and without it, there would be no Egypt at all. Every year, like clockwork, something wonderful happened. Far to the south, heavy rains fell, and the river began to swell. Slowly, the Nile rose and spilled over its banks, spreading across the dry ground. When the water pulled back, it left behind a gift, a thin layer of dark, rich mud. That black soil was so fertile that seeds dropped into it sprang to life. Wheat, barley, vegetables, fruit, all of it grew in a strip of green that hugged the river on both sides. The people who settled there did not have to wander anymore. They could stay. They could plant, harvest, store food, and plan for the future. Small villages took root along the water, and those villages grew. The river gave them everything: water to drink, fish to eat, soil to farm, and a road to travel. 2 boats moved up and down the Nile, carrying people and goods from one village to the next. And though all this happened long before Abraham, the Bible still remembers where this land came from. In the book of Beginnings, Genesis 10:6, when the nations of the earth are listed, it says, "The sons of Ham were Cush, Mizraim, Put, and Canaan." That name, Mizraim, is the very name the Bible gives to Egypt. So even in Scripture, Egypt is counted among the first great families of the world. From that family, beside that life-giving river, a people began to grow. And a story that would last thousands of years was only just beginning. But Egypt did not begin as one country. For a long time, it was actually two. To understand this, picture the Nile flowing from south to north all the way to the sea. The southern part, stretching far up the river, was a long and narrow valley squeezed between cliffs and desert. This was called Upper Egypt, upper because it sat higher up the river's path. The people there had their own ruler, their own customs, and a tall white crown that their king wore with pride. Then near the sea in the north, the river spread out wide and split into many smaller streams, like the fingers of a hand reaching into the ground. This flat, marshy, fan-shaped region was called Lower Egypt. It too had its own ruler, its own way of life, and its own crown, but this one was red. So there they were, 2 lands, 2 kings, 2 crowns, one white, one red. The people of the south and the people of the north were divided by distance and by pride. Each saw itself as separate. Each had its own gods it loved most, its own symbols, its own leaders. For generations, this is how it stayed. 2 halves of the same river, 2 halves of the same future, living side by side, but never as one. And yet a river is a powerful thing. It connects everything it touches. The same water that flowed past the marshes of the north had first passed the cliffs of the south. Trade moved along it. People moved along it. And slowly, the idea grew that perhaps these 2 lands were not meant to stay apart forever. Perhaps one day, one strong ruler would do what no one had done before, and join the white crown and the red crown into one. That day finally came, and with it came a king whose name has echoed for over 5,000 years, Narmer. Narmer was a ruler of the south, of Upper Egypt, and he was not content to rule only half a land. He looked north toward the wide green delta, and he set out to bring it under his control. The stories carved in stone show him as a fierce and determined leader. On one ancient slab of rock made to honor him, Narmer is shown wearing the white crown of the south on one side and the red crown of the north on the other. The message was simple and powerful. He ruled them both now. The two lands had become one. This was something the world had never truly seen before. For the first time, a single king sat over all of Egypt, from the southern cliffs to the northern sea. The two crowns were brought together into one double crown, white and red, joined as a sign that the land was united. Narmer is remembered as the first pharaoh of a unified Egypt, the man who started it all. With one ruler over one land, everything could be organized in a way it never could before. The whole length of the Nile now answered to a single throne. The farms, the harvests, the boats, the trade, all of it could be brought together and managed as one kingdom. And once a nation is united, it can begin to dream much bigger dreams than a scattered handful of villages ever could. Narmer had laid the foundation. The first dynasty of kings had begun. And on that foundation, the most lasting civilization the ancient world would ever know was about to be built. Now that one man ruled all of Egypt, a powerful question rose to the surface. What exactly was this king? Was he only a man? The Egyptians decided he was something far greater. To them, the pharaoh was not just a ruler. He was a living link between the people and the gods, a bridge between earth and heaven. They believed the king was chosen and filled by the divine, that he was the one person who could stand between humankind and the powerful forces that governed the sun, the river, and the harvest. When the pharaoh gave a command, it was treated as the will of the gods themselves. This belief changed everything. It meant the king's word was law beyond question. It meant his power was not only political but sacred. The people did not simply obey him out of fear of his army. They obeyed him because they believed the very order of the world depended on it. They thought that if the pharaoh was strong and faithful, the Nile would rise, the crops would grow, and life would continue. The king was seen as the keeper of balance, the one who held chaos back and kept the world in order. So the pharaoh became the center of everything. His health, his rule, and even his life after death were treated as matters of life and death for the whole nation. To honor him was to honor the gods. To serve him was to serve heaven. And to prepare for his death was to prepare for the survival of Egypt itself. It was a longing as old as the human heart, the search for someone who could stand between us and the divine. Someone who could close the distance between earth and heaven. Some stories don't just inform, they stay with you. If something stirred in your spirit just now, you may be ready for Echoes Daily, where every morning you go deeper into one Bible story, the history behind it, the details most believers never learn, and what it means for your walk today. Daily readings, biblical companions who teach as they walk with you, and a community of pilgrims learning together. The link is in the first pinned comment, but the founding door is open only for a limited time. But the God King did not rule from the heavens. He ruled from a city built by human hands. Every kingdom needs a heart, a center where decisions are made and power lives. For United Egypt, that heart was a city called Memphis. Memphis was built in a clever place, right where the two lands met, near the point where the narrow southern valley opened into the wide northern delta. It sat in the middle, like a buckle holding a belt together. From here, a king could keep his eyes on both halves of his kingdom at once. It was the perfect spot to rule a land that had only recently become one. The city grew into a busy and important place. Officials gathered there to carry out the king's orders. Records were kept, taxes were counted, and goods from all over Egypt passed through. To manage a whole kingdom, The Egyptians needed a way to keep track of everything, and so writing became one of their greatest tools. With it, they could record the harvest, list supplies, write down laws, and send messages up and down the river. A kingdom that can write things down is a kingdom that can remember, plan, and grow. Memphis became the place where all of this came together. It was the home of government, the center of trade, and a hub where skilled workers, builders, and thinkers gathered. The strength of the whole nation flowed through this one city. The whole community of Israel set out from Elim and came to the desert of Sin, and the hunger hit hard. Exodus 16:2 says the whole community grumbled against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness, and their words were sharp. Verse 3, "If only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt. There we sat around pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted, but you have brought us out into this desert to starve this entire assembly to death." Slavery, but with food. That was the trade they were willing to make. God heard it, and instead of anger, he responded with provision. He told Moses in Exodus 16:4, "I will rain down bread from heaven for you. The people are to go out each day and gather enough for that day. In this way I will test whether they will follow my instructions." That evening quail came and covered the camp, and in the morning, when the dew lifted, something thin and flaky appeared on the surface of the desert floor. The people looked at it and said to each other, "What is it?" because they had never seen anything like it. Moses told them in Exodus 16:15, "It is the bread the Lord has given you to eat." They called it manna. It tasted like wafers made with honey, according to Exodus 16:31. The instructions were simple. Gather what you need for today. Do not keep any until morning. But some did not listen. Exodus 16:20 says, "What they kept overnight was full of maggots and began to smell." And on the 6th day they were told to gather double, because the 7th day was the Sabbath, a day of rest, with no manna falling. Some went out anyway on the 7th day looking for it. There was none. God was not just feeding them, he was teaching them. One day at a time, one act of trust at a time. They moved from the desert of Sin and camped at Rephidim. And there was no water. The people were thirsty. But this time, the grumbling had an edge to it. Exodus 17:2 says, "The people quarreled with Moses and said, 'Give us water to drink.' Moses answered, 'Why do you quarrel with me? Why do you put the Lord to the test?' But they were desperate. Exodus 17:3 says, "They grumbled against Moses and said, 'Why did you bring us up out of Egypt to make us and our children and livestock die of thirst?' Moses brought it to God. His words in verse 4 are raw and honest. "What am I to do with these people? They are almost ready to stone me." God told him to walk ahead of the people, take some of the elders of Israel, take the staff he had used to strike the Nile, and go. He told Moses in Exodus 17:6, "I will stand there before you by the rock at Horeb. Strike the rock, and water will come out of it for the people to drink." Moses struck the rock. Water came out, 2 million people and their livestock. All of them drank. Moses named the place Massah and Meribah, meaning testing and quarreling, because the Israelites tested God there, asking, "Is the Lord among us or not?" Exodus 17:7. Then came war. No warning, no provocation recorded. The Amalekites simply came and attacked Israel at Rephidim. Exodus 17:8. Moses called on a man named Joshua, appearing here for the first time in the story, and gave him a direct instruction in Exodus 17:9. "Choose some of our men and go out to fight the Amalekites. Tomorrow I will stand on top of the hill with the staff of God in my hands." Joshua obeyed. The battle began, and what happened on that hilltop was unlike anything in warfare. Exodus 17:11 says, "As long as Moses held up his hands, the Israelites were winning, but whenever he lowered his hands, the Amalekites were winning." Moses' arms grew heavy. He could not hold them up forever. So Aaron and a man named Hur sat Moses down on a stone. and one stood on each side, holding his hands up, one on each arm, until sunset. Exodus 17:13 says Joshua overcame the Amalekite army with the sword. The battle was won, not by strategy, not by superior numbers, but by a man on a hill with his hands raised, and two men who refused to let those hands fall. 3 months after leaving Egypt, Israel arrived at the desert of Sinai and camped at the foot of the mountain. Exodus 19:3 says, Moses went up to God, and the Lord called to him from the mountain. What God said next was not a command, it was an invitation. Verse 4, You yourselves have seen what I did to Egypt, and how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. He reminded them first of what he had done, then he told them what he wanted. Exodus 19:5-6. Now if you obey me fully and keep my covenant, then out of all nations you will be my treasured possession. Although the whole earth is mine, you will be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. Moses came back down and laid it all before the people, and Exodus 19:8 records their answer. We will do everything the Lord has said, every single one of them, together. God told Moses he would come in a dense cloud so the people could hear him speak, so that they would always trust Moses as his messenger. Then he gave specific instructions. The people had to consecrate themselves for 2 days. They washed their clothes, they prepared, and God set a boundary around the mountain. No one was to touch it or even go near it. Exodus 19:12 warns, Whoever touches the mountain is to be put to death. On the 3rd day, Exodus 19:16 describes what happened. There was thunder and lightning, with a thick cloud over the mountain and a very loud trumpet blast. Everyone in the camp trembled. Moses led the people out to meet God, and they stood at the foot of the mountain. Mount Sinai was covered in smoke because the Lord descended on it in fire. The whole mountain trembled violently. The sound of the trumpet grew louder and louder. God had arrived. And then he spoke, not just to Moses, to everyone. The voice of God went out over the entire assembly of Israel, 2 million people standing at the foot of a burning, trembling mountain, and he gave them the 10 commandments. Exodus 22:3 opens with his identity. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. He continued, no idols, no images. Do not misuse the name of the Lord. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. 6 days of work, the 7th a day of rest, because God himself rested on the 7th day after creation. Then the commandments turned toward people. Exodus 20:12. Honor your father and your mother, so that you may live long in the land the Lord your God is giving you. Do not murder. Do not commit adultery. Do not steal. Do not give false testimony against your neighbor. Do not covet anything that belongs to your neighbor, his house, his wife, his servants, his animals. Nothing. 10 commands, given by the voice of God himself from a mountain on fire. The people could not handle it. Exodus 20:18-19 says, When the people saw the thunder and lightning, and heard the trumpet and saw the mountain in smoke, they trembled with fear. They stayed at a distance and said to Moses, Speak to us yourself, and we will listen. But do not have God speak to us, or we will die. Moses told them not to be afraid, that God had come to test them, so that the fear of God would be with them and keep them from sinning. Then Moses approached the thick darkness where God was. Inside that darkness, God kept speaking. What followed the 10 Commandments was a detailed set of laws covering almost every area of daily life. Laws about servants, how they were to be treated when they were to go free. Laws about injuries, what happened when someone hurt another person, accidentally or on purpose. Laws about property, what a man owed if his animal damaged someone else's field. But God also spoke about justice in a deeper sense. Exodus 22:21-22. Do not mistreat or oppress a foreigner, for you were foreigners in Egypt. Do not take advantage of the widow or the fatherless. He reminded them where they came from. He reminded them what it felt like to be powerless. He also established 3 annual feasts: the Festival of Unleavened Bread, the Festival of Harvest, and the Festival of Ingathering, times when all the men of Israel were to appear before the Lord. Moses came down from the mountain and told the people everything God had said. Then Exodus 24:4 says, Moses wrote down everything the Lord had told him. He got up early the next morning, built an altar at the foot of the mountain, and set up 12 stone pillars, 1 for each tribe of Israel. Young men offered burnt offerings. Moses took half the blood and put it in bowls. He took the book of the covenant and read it aloud to the people. Exodus 24:7 records their response. We will do everything the Lord has said. We will obey. Then Moses took the other half of the blood and sprinkled it on the people, saying in verse 8, This is the blood of the covenant that the Lord has made with you in accordance with all these words. The covenant was sealed, not with a signature, with blood. After the covenant was sealed, God called Moses up the mountain again. Exodus 24:12. Come up to me on the mountain and stay here, and I will give you the tablets of stone with the law and commandments I have written for their instruction. Moses set out with Joshua. He told the elders to wait. Aaron and Hur were with them to handle any disputes. Then Moses went up into the cloud covering the mountain. Exodus 24:16 says, The glory of the Lord settled on Mount Sinai, and the cloud covered it for 6 days. On the 7th day, God called to Moses from within the cloud. To the Israelites watching from below, the glory of the Lord looked like a consuming fire on top of the mountain. Moses entered the cloud, and he stayed there 40 days and 40 nights. During those 40 days, God gave Moses instructions for everything needed to build the tabernacle, the sacred portable dwelling place where God would live among his people. Every detail was covered. The Ark of the Covenant, made of acacia wood and overlaid with pure gold. The atonement cover on top of it, with 2 golden cherubim facing each other with wings spread upward. The table for the bread of the presence, the gold lampstand with 7 branches, the altar for burnt offerings. The courtyard surrounding the tabernacle with its linen curtains. God also gave instructions for the priestly garments, the ephod, the breastpiece set with 12 precious stones, 1 for each tribe of Israel, the robe, the turban. Every piece had meaning. Nothing was left to chance. And at the end of those 40 days, Exodus 31:18 says, When the Lord finished speaking to Moses on Mount Sinai, he gave him the 2 tablets of the covenant law, the tablets of stone inscribed by the finger of God. While Moses was on the mountain, something was happening at the bottom of it. 40 days is a long time to wait when you cannot see what is happening. The people grew restless, and then they made a decision that changed everything. Exodus 32:1. When the people saw that Moses was so long in coming down from the mountain, they gathered around Aaron and said, Come, make us gods who will go before us. As for this fellow Moses who brought us up out of Egypt, we don't know what has happened to him. They went to Aaron, Moses' own brother, the man left in charge, and Aaron gave in. He told them to bring their gold earrings, and they did immediately without hesitation. Aaron took the gold, shaped it with a tool, and made it into a golden calf. Exodus 32:4 records the words that followed. These are your gods, Israel, who brought you up out of Egypt. Aaron built an altar in front of it and announced a festival to the Lord for the next day. Early the next morning, the people offered burnt offerings and fellowship offerings. Then they sat down to eat and drink, and got up to indulge in revelry. On the mountain, God told Moses what was happening. Exodus 32:7-8, Go down, because your people, whom you brought up out of Egypt, have become corrupt. They have been quick to turn away from what I commanded them, and have made themselves an idol cast in the shape of a calf. They have bowed down to it and sacrificed to it, and have said, 'These are your gods, Israel, who brought you up out of Egypt.'" Then God said something that would have ended everything. Exodus 32:10, "Now leave me alone, so that my anger may burn against them, and that I may destroy them. Then I will make you into a great nation." He offered Moses a way out, a fresh start, a new nation built from Moses alone. Moses did not take it. He stood before God and pleaded for Israel. Exodus 32:11-12, "Lord, why should your anger burn against your people, whom you brought out of Egypt with great power and a mighty hand? Why should the Egyptians say, 'It was with evil intent that he brought them out, to kill them in the mountains and to wipe them off the face of the earth?'" Then he reminded God of his own promises. Verse 13, "Remember your servants Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, to whom you swore by your own self. I will make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky, and I will give your descendants all this land I promised them, and it will be their inheritance forever." Exodus 32:14 says, "The Lord relented and did not bring on his people the disaster he had threatened." Moses turned and went down the mountain, the 2 stone tablets in his hands, tablets inscribed on both sides, front and back, the work of God, the writing of God engraved on them. Joshua was waiting partway down. He heard noise from the camp and told Moses it sounded like war. Moses told him it was not the sound of victory or defeat, it was the sound of singing. When Moses got close enough to see the calf and the dancing, Exodus 32:19 says his anger burned hot, and he threw the tablets out of his hands, breaking them to pieces at the foot of the mountain. Moses moved quickly. He took the golden calf, burned it in the fire, ground it to powder, scattered it on the water, and made the Israelites drink it. Then he turned to Aaron. "What did these people do to you, that you led them into such great sin?" Exodus 32:21. Aaron's answer was evasive. He blamed the people, described throwing the gold into the fire, and then said in verse 24, "And out came this calf," as if the calf had made itself. Moses stood at the entrance to the camp and called out in Exodus 32:26, "Whoever is for the Lord, come to me." The entire tribe of Levi came and stood with him. Moses gave them a difficult command. Each man was to take his sword and go through the camp. Exodus 32:28 says, about 3,000 people died that day. The next morning Moses went back to God. What he said next reveals the depth of who he was. Exodus 32:32, "But now please forgive their sin. But if not, then blot me out of the book you have written." He offered his own name, his own place before God. In exchange for Israel's forgiveness, God's answer was clear in verse 33. "Whoever has sinned against me, I will blot out of my book." Each person would bear their own consequence. God then sent a plague on the people because of what they had done with the calf. God told Moses to chisel out 2 stone tablets like the first ones. He was going up the mountain again. Exodus 34:2. "Be ready in the morning and then come up on Mount Sinai. Present yourself to me there on top of the mountain. No one is to come with you or be seen anywhere on the mountain. Not even the flocks and herds may graze in front of the mountain." Moses cut the tablets. He went up early in the morning alone, but before the commandments were given again, Moses asked for something he had never asked for before. Exodus 33:18, "Now show me your glory." God told him no man could see his face and live, but he would do something. Exodus 33:22-23, "When my glory passes by, I will put you in a cleft in the rock and cover you with my hand until I have passed by. Then I will remove my hand and you will see my back, but my face must not be seen." And that is exactly what happened. God passed before Moses and proclaimed his name in Exodus 34, 6-7. The Lord, the compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness, maintaining love to thousands, and forgiving wickedness, rebellion, and sin, yet he does not leave the guilty unpunished. Moses bowed to the ground and worshipped. He stayed on the mountain another 40 days and 40 nights without eating bread or drinking water. God wrote the 10 Commandments on the new tablets, and when Moses finally came down, Exodus 34:29 says he was not aware that his face was radiant because he had spoken with the Lord. Aaron and all the Israelites saw his face, and they were afraid to come near him. Moses had to put a veil over his face just to speak to them. The instructions God had given on the mountain were not suggestions, they were a blueprint. And Israel followed every single detail. Exodus 39:43 says Moses inspected all the work and saw that they had done it just as the Lord had commanded. So Moses blessed them. Then came the moment everything had been built for. God told Moses in Exodus 42, set up the tabernacle, the tent of meeting, on the first day of the first month. Moses did exactly that. He set up the frames, put the curtains in place, brought in the ark, placed the poles, set up the atonement cover. He put the table in the tent, arranged the bread on it, placed the lampstand and lit the lamps. He set the gold altar in the tent and burned fragrant incense on it. He put up the curtain at the entrance. He set the altar for burnt offerings near the entrance, and offered burnt offerings and grain offerings on it, every piece in its place, every detail honored. And then Exodus 40:34 describes what happened. Then the cloud covered the tent of meeting, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. Moses could not enter the tent of meeting because the cloud had settled on it, and the glory of the Lord filled it. God had moved in. From that moment on, Exodus 40:36-37 explains how Israel would travel. Whenever the cloud lifted from above the tabernacle, the Israelites set out, but if the cloud did not lift, they did not set out until the day it lifted. By day the cloud of the Lord was over the tabernacle, and fire was in the cloud by night, in the sight of all the Israelites during all their travels. They moved when God moved. They stopped when God stopped. Nearly a year had passed at the foot of Sinai. Then the cloud lifted, and Israel moved. Numbers 10:11-12 records the departure. On the 20th day of the second month of the second year, the cloud lifted from above the tabernacle of the covenant law. Then the Israelites set out from the desert of Sinai and traveled from place to place until the cloud came to rest in the desert of Paran. They were finally moving toward the promised land, but it did not take long for the complaints to start again. Numbers 11.1 says the people complained about their hardships in the hearing of the Lord, and when he heard them, his anger burned. Fire from the Lord burned among them and consumed some of the outskirts of the camp. The people cried out to Moses. Moses prayed to God, and the fire died down. They named that place Taberah, meaning burning, because fire from the Lord had burned among them. Then came another complaint. Numbers 11:4-5 says the rabble with them began to crave other food, and again the Israelites started wailing and said, "If only we had meat to eat. We remember the fish we ate in Egypt at no cost, also the cucumbers, melons, leeks, onions, and garlic." They were tired of manna. They wanted what Egypt had offered them, even though Egypt had made them slaves. Moses heard the people weeping, family after family, at the entrance to their tents. God's anger burned, and Moses himself was troubled. He brought his frustration directly to God in Numbers 11:13. "Where can I get meat for all these people? They keep wailing to me, 'Give us meat to eat.'" God told Moses to gather 70 elders and bring them to the tent of meeting. He would take some of the spirit that was on Moses and put it on them, so they could share the burden of leading the people. Then God told Moses to tell the people to consecrate themselves for meat, because they would have meat, not for 1 day or 5 or 10 or 20, Numbers 11:20, but for a whole month, until it comes out of your nostrils and you loathe it. A wind went out from the Lord and drove quail in from the sea. Numbers 11:31 says, they were about 3 feet deep on the ground, spread out a day's walk in every direction around the camp. The people gathered quail all that day, all night, and all the next day. But while the meat was still between their teeth, before it could be consumed, Numbers 11:33 says the anger of the Lord burned against the people, and he struck them with a severe plague. They named that place Kibroth Hattava, graves of craving, because there they buried the people who had craved other food. From Kibroth Hattava, they moved to Hazeroth. And there, something unexpected happened, closer to home than any outside threat. Numbers 12:1 says Miriam and Aaron began to talk against Moses because of his Cushite wife, for he had married a Cushite. But that was not really the issue. Verse 2 reveals what was underneath it. Has the Lord spoken only through Moses? Hasn't he also spoken through us? His own brother and sister, questioning his authority. God heard it. Suddenly God called the 3 of them, Moses, Aaron, and Miriam, to come to the tent of meeting. All 3 went. God came down in a pillar of cloud and stood at the entrance to the tent. He summoned Aaron and Miriam, and they stepped forward. Numbers 12:6-8 records what God said. When there is a prophet among you, I, the Lord, reveal myself to them in visions. I speak to them in dreams. But this is not true of my servant Moses. He is faithful in all my house. With him I speak face to face, clearly and not in riddles. He sees the form of the Lord. Why then were you not afraid to speak against my servant Moses? The anger of the Lord burned against them. When the cloud lifted from above the tent, Miriam's skin was leprous. It became as white as snow. Aaron turned and looked at her and said to Moses in Numbers 12:11-12, Please, my Lord, I ask you not to hold against us the sin we have so foolishly committed. Do not let her be like a stillborn infant coming from its mother's womb with its flesh half eaten away. Moses cried out to the Lord, Please, God, heal her. God told Moses she would be confined outside the camp for 7 days, and after that, she could be brought back in. Numbers 12:15 says Miriam was confined outside the camp for 7 days, and the people did not move on until she was brought back. From Hazeroth, they moved into the desert of Paran, and there at Kadesh Barnea, on the very edge of the Promised Land, God gave Moses a command. Numbers 13:2. Send some men to explore the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the Israelites. From each ancestral tribe, send one of its leaders. Moses sent 12 men, 1 from each tribe. Among them were Caleb from the tribe of Judah, and a man named Hoshea, son of Nun, from the tribe of Ephraim. Moses changed his name to Joshua before they left. Moses gave them clear instructions in Numbers 13:17-20. Go up through the Negev and into the hill country, see what the land is like. Are the people strong or weak? Are there few or many? Is the land good or bad? Are the towns unwalled or fortified? Is the soil fertile or poor? Are there trees or not? And bring back some of the fruit of the land. It was the season of the first ripe grapes. The 12 spies went and explored the land for 40 days. They went through the Negev, all the way to Rehob near Lebo Hamath. They went up through the Negev and came to Hebron, where the descendants of Anak, men of great size, lived. When they reached the valley of Eshcol, Numbers 13:23 says they cut off a branch bearing a single cluster of grapes so large it had to be carried on a pole between 2 men. They also brought back pomegranates and figs. After 40 days, they returned to Moses, Aaron, and the whole Israelite community at Kadesh in the desert of Paran. They showed them the fruit and gave their report. Numbers 13:27, We went into the land to which you sent us, and it does flow with milk and honey. Here is its fruit. Then came the word that changed everything. Numbers 13:28. But the people who live there are powerful, and the cities are fortified and very large. We even saw descendants of Anak there. 10 of the 12 spies were afraid. They told the people the land devours those living in it, and that all the people they saw there were of great size. Numbers 13:33. We saw the Nephilim there. The descendants of Anak come from the Nephilim. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them. That was all it took. Numbers 14:1 says that night all the members of the community raised their voices and wept aloud. The people grumbled against Moses and Aaron. They said to each other in verse 3, "If only we had died in Egypt or in this wilderness. Why is the Lord bringing us to this land only to let us fall by the sword? Our wives and children will be taken as plunder. Wouldn't it be better for us to go back to Egypt?" They started talking about choosing a new leader and going back. Caleb and Joshua tore their clothes. They stood before the entire assembly and said in Numbers 14:7-9, "The land we passed through and explored is exceedingly good. If the Lord is pleased with us, he will lead us into that land, a land flowing with milk and honey, and will give it to us. Only do not rebel against the Lord, and do not be afraid of the people of the land, because we will devour them. Their protection is gone, but the Lord is with us. Do not be afraid of them." Numbers 14:10 says the whole assembly talked about stoning them. The glory of the Lord appeared at the tent of meeting before all the Israelites, and God spoke to Moses. Numbers 14:11-12. "How long will these people treat me with contempt? How long will they refuse to believe in me, in spite of all the signs I have performed among them? I will strike them down with a plague and destroy them, but I will make you into a nation greater and stronger than they." Once again, Moses stood in the gap. He reminded God of his own reputation among the nations. He quoted God's own words back to him, the same declaration Moses had heard on the mountain, and he pleaded for forgiveness. Numbers 14:20. The Lord replied, "I have forgiven them, as you asked." But forgiveness did not erase consequence. God declared in Numbers 14:22-23, "Not one of those who saw my glory and the signs I performed in Egypt and in the wilderness, but who disobeyed me and tested me 10 times, not one of them will ever see the land I promised on oath to their ancestors. No one who has treated me with contempt will ever see it." Every Israelite 20 years old or more, with the exception of Caleb and Joshua, would die in the wilderness. Numbers 14:34 gives the sentence plainly. "For 40 years, 1 year for each of the 40 days you explored the land, you will suffer for your sins and know what it is like to have me against you." The 10 spies who had spread the bad report were struck down with a plague before the Lord and died immediately. Only Caleb and Joshua survived. The next morning, some of the people decided they would go up to the land after all. Moses warned them not to. The Lord was not with them, but they went anyway. Numbers 14:45 says the Amalekites and Canaanites who lived in that hill country came down and attacked them and beat them down all the way to Hormah. The road to the Promised Land had just gotten 40 years longer. 40 years passed. The wilderness became the place where an entire generation was buried. One by one, the people who had left Egypt, who had seen the plagues, who had crossed the sea, who had heard God's voice at Sinai, died. The wilderness received them all. Aaron was among them. Numbers 20:23-24 records God telling Moses and Aaron at Mount Hor, "Aaron will be gathered to his people. He will not enter the land I give the Israelites, because both of you rebelled against my command at the waters of Meribah." God told Moses to take Aaron and his son Eleazar up Mount Hor. Moses removed Aaron's priestly garments and put them on Eleazar. Numbers 20:28 says Aaron died there on top of the mountain. Moses and Eleazar came back down. When the whole community learned that Aaron had died, the entire house of Israel mourned for him 30 days, and Moses himself received the same sentence. At Meribah, when the people had no water, God had told Moses to speak to the rock. Instead, Moses struck it twice with his staff. The water came out, but God said to Moses and Aaron in Numbers 20:12, "Because you did not trust in me enough to honor me as holy in the sight of the Israelites, you will not bring this community into the land I give them." Moses would lead them to the border, but he would not cross it. Despite this, Moses kept leading. The new generation grew. Battles were fought and won east of the Jordan. The kingdoms of Sihon, king of the Amorites, and Og, king of Bashan, were defeated. The people of Israel camped on the plains of Moab, across the Jordan from Jericho, closer to the promised land than any of their parents had ever been. On the plains of Moab, Moses gathered the new generation of Israel around him for the last time. He spoke for a long time. He recounted the entire journey, the departure from Egypt, the years in the wilderness, every moment of provision and every moment of failure. He renewed the covenant between God and the people. He gave laws, warnings and blessings. Deuteronomy 6:4-5, known forever as the Shema, came from Moses' mouth during these final speeches. "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength." Then Moses blessed each tribe individually. When he had finished, he climbed. Deuteronomy 34:1 says Moses went up from the plains of Moab to Mount Nebo, to the top of Pisgah, across from Jericho. And God showed him the land, all of it. From Gilead to Dan, all of Naphtali, Ephraim and Manasseh, all the land of Judah, as far as the Mediterranean Sea, the Negev, and the whole region from the valley of Jericho to Zor. Deuteronomy 34:4. Then the Lord said to him, "This is the land I promised on oath to Abraham, Isaac and Jacob, when I said, 'I will give it to your descendants.' I have let you see it with your eyes, but you will not cross over into it." And Deuteronomy 34:5-6 says, Moses, the servant of the Lord, died there in Moab, as the Lord had said. God buried him in Moab, in the valley opposite Beth Peor, but to this day no one knows where his grave is. Moses was 120 years old when he died. His eyes were not weak and his strength had not gone. The Israelites grieved for Moses on the plains of Moab for 30 days. Then Joshua, son of Nun, was filled with the spirit of wisdom, because Moses had laid his hands on him. And the book of Deuteronomy closes with these words in chapter 34, verses 10-12. Since then, no prophet has risen in Israel like Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face, who did all those signs and wonders the Lord sent him to do in Egypt, to Pharaoh and to all his officials and to his whole land. For no one has ever shown the mighty power or performed the awesome deeds that Moses did in the sight of all Israel. May if this video meant something to you, the best thing you can do right now is share it. Send it to someone who needs to hear this story today. You never know whose desert season this might speak directly into. And if you are not subscribed yet, this is your moment. Hit that button and join a community that goes deep into the Bible, one story at a time. Every video is built to bring scripture to life in a way that stays with you long after the screen goes dark. The next story is already waiting. We will see you there.